3 photographers from 3 different time zones, all connected by night photography and all shooting with the Pentax K1. We are the Nightaxians. Old Car City. See, I'm just jumping right into it.
That's
on
right.
October 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. We're going to do a workshop down there. It's about an hour outside of Atlanta. It is a bunch of old American-made cars in the woods on a private property that we can tour. We're getting access to it, and we're going to shoot this place at night. So you've got the weirdness of the subject matter and also just the inherent weirdness of photographing at night. So it's going to be a blast. I'm going to put the link down below. It's capecodworkshops.com/Car City. We're going to bring up to 10 people into this place. There's so much room to shoot. I'm constantly hearing from people that their big concern with any workshop nowadays is just too many people on site. Doesn't matter how many instructors you have. They don't want to shoot other people. So we're going to keep this down to a lower amount. So you don't have to worry about that. Although out of all locations, and Ken, I think you'll agree, this probably could take 150 people. It would be fine. Yeah. Yep. So hope you can join us for that. We have a bonus location afterwards on the 29th. It's the school bus graveyard. So that's a fun place. It's smaller, but there's a lot of cool stuff in there that you're not going to see anywhere else, including a bus with Waldo painted on the side of it. And if your dream in life has been to find Waldo and you've always failed at it, now is the time. I will get you Waldo. You have my promise. We're going to help you find Waldo. I found Waldo. You can too.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty good plug right there.
Is.
Just the Waldo part. I should have just led with that. Come down. We're going to shoot Waldo.
Next time.
Yeah, next time. All right. Yeah.
Lead with that next time.
I will lead with that next time. We're going to talk a little bit about a big hot button topic right now in the photography community, which is AI. And we come up with a list of topics that we want to talk about. Ken has made us a really nice Google sheet that we can go in and write stuff down. And when we were talking about filming this week, Mike had brought up the idea of AI. It seems to be on everybody's mind. So I'm going to just hand it over to you. What's your take on this? Where do you think it's going?
Well, I have no idea where it's going, but it really seems like it's something that, at least for someone who's a photographer, is probably should be almost concerned about a little bit, just because I think we've all had people asking us when they'll look at our pictures, our night pictures, of course, how did you create that? So, at least for us, it's very specific to, that was done in camera. That's like not something that I just Photoshop created. And I saw an article just the other day about some photographer that was he'd kind of gotten famous and doing portraits of people, and turns out they were all AI created, and he wasn't even letting anyone know that they were created, which I'm sure there's probably should be a lot of people that were insulted by it. But I know Ken has experimented some with some AI stuff. I haven't really gone there yet, but it's amazing what can be done with it, but it's also kind of frightening.
Yeah, it is. The first thing I thought of when I saw some of the stuff that I've generated and what Ken has generated is like, does this replace photographers who are shooting for art photography?
Absolutely.
Like what we do? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point, because there's this guy named Jason Allen who used Midjourney to create AI generated art, and he entered it into the Colorado State Fair Fine Arts competition. And now, to be fair, it was in the digital arts and manipulated photography category, but still, he won first prize.
Yeah.
And he was upfront with Midjourney. Now, this was a few months ago when a lot of people didn't know what Midjourney was. So some people, they think that maybe the judges didn't know what Midjourney was, even though he mentioned it on his entry. But he wrote, and I'll quote him verbatim. I've set out to make a statement using Midjourney in a competitive manner, and wow, I could not be more excited about having Juan with my favorite piece.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh boy. I mean, we already struggle with people mentioning, is this Photoshopped? Is this Photoshopped?
Mm-hmm.
You have to explain to them that it's not. We live in this default world where when you see something, is it real? Is it not real? How did you manipulate it? I don't think it looks like that. You must have done something, and you have to. It's just an odd place to be in, where you have people by default think something is not real, and you have to back them away from it.
Right, and it's doubly so for night photography, especially if you add light painting. People just frequently think that it's fake somehow, or you've somehow digitally manipulated it or added it in Photoshop. And people always use this phrase Photoshop to mean that something is fake.
All encompassing.
Yeah,
it's like Xerox.
Fake.
Yes.
Even though most people use Photoshop to simply do something like, color correct or sharpen or what have you. But
yeah.
Anyway, but I mean, you do bring up a good point, though, about the erosion of trust through deep fakes and things like that, because this can only erode trust more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if people are already thinking what we do is fake, then what's this going to do?
Yeah, it's all out the window.
Yeah.
The person you mentioned, Mike, about doing the portraits, which I think you might have sent me the link on, and it looked to me a little, I wouldn't say fakey, but we also live in a heavily filtered Instagram society where real people are using beauty filters, and it makes them look like they've been AI generated. And I'm not trying to offend anybody who's like an Instagram influencer, but you can tell when somebody's using one of those filters.
Oh, yeah.
And now when you see that AI generated artwork, to the person who's used to seeing filters, you may just think that that was a filtered person.
Yes. And
where it's just completely fake. So that you don't know on that. So when you get to a point where somebody posts an image on social media, whatever site that is, will that site have an algorithm to let people know that this is,
you know.
Yeah. And is that appropriate? Is it not appropriate? Do we start seeing groups pop up that say real photos only? Are we starting to see, do we see a separation of things? I don't know.
Right now you're almost kind of everything's getting blurred a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And for an artist, that's tough if you're trying to sell work, because now you're competing against somebody sitting in a computer. But is that any less art if somebody is coming up with these prompts? That comes out of their brain creatively. So who's to say that that's not its own art?
It's a different sort of creativity, but it's the creativity is more of someone being a writer, I think, not a photographer.
Yeah, so maybe there's going to be a point where they say something like, this is a conceptual art category. I thought of a concept. I asked the computer to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it would be better served as a separate category.
Absolutely.
As somebody who does art shows, I do art fairs with, I set up the tent and I hang up all my work. I thought about this last year. Like if somebody just sat at home, did a bunch of AI generated stuff and just printed it all out and went to an art show and just said, here's my stuff, and they could potentially lie about it. They could say it was a painting, or they could just say it was AI generated. Is that competition for me? And initially I thought, yeah, it probably is. But for anybody out there who sells artwork, that a lot of times it's not just the artwork, it's the story behind the artwork.
Right.
And I've always felt like if you go to a show and you're there as the artist and you tell them the story behind your creation, how you light painted the 16 doors in 4 minutes, and it took you 5 tries, and that you left a little hint of yourself, a little mistake that you made. Like you build that in, and now that's the value of the entire artwork. Yeah. Where if somebody comes in with beautiful things, but there's no personal connection beyond I put in 5 words and this is what it came out with, does it have as much meaning in the art community or to people looking to purchase art for their homes? These are questions I don't have answers to, really.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't
and I
have
think
answers to that either.
with some of the AI, I think you could like say go to a lighthouse and snap a picture with your iPhone and then plug it into some of the AI stuff and tell it to, create something completely different out of it. So it starts with their picture, but then, the end product is that actually still a picture.
Yeah, well, you bring up this really interesting point. So I want to mention that there is a wedding photographer, and actually several wedding photographers, who go and do a shoot, and they'll actually photograph people, whether it's bride and groom or what have you, and then they go back and using Midjourney or Dolly 2 or something else, they digitally manipulate these photos so the people are in different poses or they're in different scenes or what have you. So on the one hand, you can say it's taking it might take money away from photographers, but there are some photographers who are actually leveraging this and using it to further their career. So I don't know, mixed bag.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing. And, speaking of that, speaking of blurring the lines between photography and AI generated art, Dolly 2 also allows you to edit your photos. So let's say you take a photo of a flower and you have a couple of blades of grass that are really close by. And because you're using a shallow depth of field with your lens, those are out of focus. You can actually type in word prompts and tell it to sharpen those leaves or to get rid of them altogether. And granted, people sometimes already do this stuff through Photoshop or other photo editing, but this makes it really easy because you're just typing in key prompts now. And is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. That's for people to decide, but it's possible.
Do you think
And
when
it's not going away.
no, it's not. It's going to
Yeah.
be integrated somehow. Do you think that when software Photoshop and Lightroom came out, that there was a block of artists who looked at that and said, this is manipulation, it's not real? Or even just transitioning from film to digital, are we looking at that kind of, step?
It could very well be, but the people who cried out Photoshop is cheating, it's not real, aren't, maybe they're forgetful of the fact that ever since people were taking photos, they were faking things. I mean, the first HDR photo was done by Gustave Le Gray in 1865, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. So HDR, for instance, is nothing new, but when Photomatics came out during the hideous HDR wars of 15 years ago,
so many deaths. I don't even like to think about it at this point.
People thought this was a new thing, and it's like, no, it's not really that new. People were doing that long before you ever thought of it. But I don't know. So every new thing that comes along is always heralded as all sorts of things, including the death of photography or the death of this, but it's also giving us new tools. And so the truth of the matter, I think, is that it'll end up being really horrible, really great, and everything in between.
Yeah.
That is a great assessment. That's like, imagine if the weatherman was like, well, tonight it's either going to rain or not, and you might get 1 to 100 inches of snow.
Yeah.
Could be something like that, which is actually the typical forecast where I live. But
yeah.
It's going to be integrated. How much it gets integrated and how much it gets accepted is going to be just up to civilization. I don't really know where it's going to go. I could see it as a tool, like you just mentioned. I mean, being able to remove things quickly for commercial production purposes is gold. I mean, it's a time saver, and time is money,
Yeah.
And for artwork, if I'm able to type in a prompt to say enhance Milky Way, remove planes, I would consider doing it just to see what it looks like. However,
right, because you would do that anyway.
Yeah, there are certain things you would do anyway, but that wouldn't stop me from doing the rest of the artistic stuff that I do to my work, my color toning, the exposure level that I like. So we're looking at probably like hybrid artwork when it
It's
comes
conceivable
to
that
photography.
somewhere down the line, though, let's say some sort of AI will be able to tell what you like and all your preferences and all your color corrections and what you like to do, and go ahead and examine the photos that you do and the settings you use, and then go ahead and implement them automatically.
Yeah.
And it's already getting pretty close to that, because you have Imagine AI. Well, now they call themselves Imagine, IMAGEN, and they somewhat do that already with via Lightroom Classic.
Mm-hmm.
Because I use that for my event photography, and this is where I think, for my personal interest, I like using AI to do batch processing and redundant tasks, repetitive tasks, and things like that. To me, that's really useful because I want to get on with the creativity part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can batch process a whole bunch of things and get it to 80% of where I want it to go, and it's done all these stupid mundane things that I would ordinarily do anyway, and then it just leaves the artistic decisions for the other 20% or what have you, I'm okay with that.
Right. And that is a big difference between still getting to your artistic output, your vision,
Yeah.
but also not being to the point where you're like, you know what? I don't feel like driving out to the Mojave this weekend. Hey, AI, generate me a Milky Way picture over a Joshua tree, in my style. I'm going to go have a sandwich.
That's right.
You know, I think when we get to that point, art to some degree becomes meaningless, but also, why do we do it? Well, I do it because I enjoy it, and I like teaching it, and I enjoy that part of it. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just about just the photo.
Yeah, it's the whole process of it.
It's getting out under the night sky. You know, I don't feel threatened from the standpoint of like, well, I'm not going to be able to do the things I do now because AI exists. Of course I could still do all those things.
Absolutely.
Unless it turns into the Terminator and they're roaming the earth and it says no night photography. But from an art sales standpoint, okay, there could be some competition on that. But yeah, exactly as you modeled it, Ken, that whole like take care of everything up to a point. Yeah. Wedding photographers, concert photographers, big batch processors like that are going to love it.